Yes. And yeah, that's the last session, guys, as you know. And I really want to just send you off on a good note, on a good, on a good note on how you actually can move forward with everything you've learned. And before I actually move in, I just want to kind of set the stage because throughout the entire week, some of you may know me from LinkedIn because you followed me. Some of you may know nothing about me, right? And I've been in your shoes myself. I was a PhD at Karolinska Institute here in Sweden, in Stockholm. And I did a PhD. In my entire career, I have built like the past when I started my PhD for 15 years, I have built a career towards working in science. I always wanted to be, a chemist. When I was young, I wanted to work in a lab. And I realized while doing my PhD that, something didn't feel quite right. Being in the lab, I felt quite isolated, and I realized I think this may not be the path that I want to continue. And it took a lot of courage to admit that, because you prepare for something for such a long time and all of a sudden you realize, oh, maybe I actually do want something else. And I also would encourage you, allow yourself to develop and evolve really in that journey, because this is really what it is about. And I grew up in a small town in Germany, like 500 people living there, and very traditional German family from the Southwest. And it was very much like, learn something that will always be needed. So I was like, okay, pharma, scientist, lab. And also it was very much like the role models that I had, they were like, you start something today and you're just going to continue in the same direction. And I think really being in 2026, where we are right now, I think this has changed a lot. And I have found myself sometimes being stuck in that mindset, where I was like, I'm on this track. This is what I should continue. I can't do anything else because it would be a waste of time. I can tell you, people have asked me now that I'm this entrepreneur. Isn't it strange that you leave your skills and your PhD behind? Wasn't that a waste of time? And I absolutely don't think it was, because I use these skills on a daily basis. I may not necessarily use my subject matter expertise. But really, as I realized, coming back to my story, I didn't want to continue in academia. I was like, okay, I need to do something else, right? And I was always like, I'm a bit of a control freak, and Angela knows that. So I was like, this can't be like accident of what I'm going to do next. So I was like, I need to find out what I can actually do. So a bit selfishly, I started co-organize career sessions for PhD students and postdocs at Karolinska Institute, where we invited people that actually make the transition. And guys, this was like one of the most illuminating things ever. And that's why I also definitely wanted to organize this careers week for you guys, because for me, listening to people who have made the transition, understanding the wide variety of careers that you can pursue after PhD was it was such a game changer. I felt so empowered on what my PhD actually has brought me and where it can bring me in the future. And really, as I went on my own kind of like reflective journey, I found my own path. And it was a very long journey of 2 years, talking to a lot of people. And I will talk about this a little bit more in my coming slides, but eventually transitioning into becoming an entrepreneur. And while this may seem very different from doing a PhD, it actually is not, because I think a lot of people in this room can relate to when I say, when you do a PhD, you have to wear all these many different hats. It's the exact same thing running a startup. So there's so many parallels and so many skills that I directly applied from my PhD in building this company. And I also want to say, I don't think I would have had the courage to build a company if I didn't do a PhD, because my PhD taught me one thing: you can do anything if you put your mind to it. So very important learning for me. So that eventually led me, through, it took some time. I met Angela on LinkedIn, and I told this story before. But really, it led me to co-found this company with Angela, where we really have the mission to empower PhDs in their career choices and show them how they can actually make the transition in teaching very practical things that actually come from the hiring rooms that are going to open doors for them. I am the CEO, but I really am the Chief Inspiration Officer of AlmaMe. This is what I love doing, and it's really what fulfills me. Being here with you guys today, having this last session on inspiring you how you can move forward from here is, what I live for. So, yeah. And I want to start with something. I have seen a lot of PhDs working with PhDs for more than 4 years. I think we sometimes have this picture of there is the PhD and then there is a career, right? And somehow these two parts are a little bit disconnected. I do my PhD and then I think what I'm going to do next. And really what I want to encourage you, we all do a PhD, whether we want to stay in academia or not, to build a successful career. We educate ourselves to build on these skills and do something that is meaningful and fulfilling. And really what I hope you're going to leave this session with today is that these two things are absolutely no two separate things, but it's one thing. So start wherever you are in your PhD to think of doing this PhD as something that is building skills for your future career, whether it will be inside of academia or outside of academia, rather than just thinking of it as another degree or a thesis to be finished. Yeah, so this is my little animation here. And, a PhD, I want to think of a PhD as a driver's license, and a PhD can take you in many different directions. And one very obvious direction that we all know is the postdoc direction, right? But I also want to tell you that this driver license enables you to go on any street you want, really. And once you realize that there are all these other different roads, it can actually feel really exciting. And you can even feel like, wow, I'm really looking forward to making that transition into industry or into a non-academic role, because there is this entire world outside. And just as an example here, when you look at these people here on a slide, they all have a very similar background, like I do. I have a PhD in immunology or in medicine. And they have done similar things, but you can already appreciate they went into completely different directions, right? One person became an equity research analyst, analyzing whether companies should invest or not because they understand clinical data reports. Or some person became a scientist in industry, so you can still keep doing bench science if this is what you love to do. Another person became a program officer in a patient organization, is an NGO. And then we had here, some second and Louisa moving into McKinsey, becoming a management consultant. So really, if you think of your PhD as something that enables you to work in so many different places. And why this is also important, and I know you guys are already here in this Careers Week, so since it's highly focused on leaving academia, the reality also is, and I think this is something academia often doesn't communicate well enough, is that at the end of the day, it's a numbers game and there are not enough places for everyone to stay. And I am totally aware that a lot of you guys are leaving voluntarily, but there are also many people we have worked with, they left because they literally ran out of funding. They wanted to be academics. But the reality of actually making an academic career is really, really narrow. So I would actually just encourage you to be open to what comes next, and also not whatever your environment may excuse me, whatever your environment may tell you about leaving academia. I know there is a lot of talks about being a failure or not being able to make it. I just want to tell you that's so not true. You're absolutely not a failure if you're leaving. So many people have built extremely meaningful careers outside of academia. And as I showed you, there is a whole world just waiting for you. And now that we have been in this week for, well, a week, it's Friday. And I just want to understand who of you actually feels prepared to make that next career step. And maybe we could even contribute a little bit to skew this towards, on the scale of prepared versus unprepared, more towards the prepared step. But I would just love to hear, and I still don't know how to do polls. So if you just wanna indicate somehow, and I don't know what's the best way of doing this, Angela, I don't know, I can't see the chat. Or if you guys just wanna give me a thumbs up. Wait, if
I'm
I
gonna
max out.
I'm gonna put a poll here for
Oh my
everybody.
God, okay, cool, Angela. So you put a poll. I love this. Never used the function. So I just want to understand who actually feels prepared to make that next step. And it's totally fine if you still walk out of this Careers Week and you feel like I'm overwhelmed or there was so much information, because just trust the process. You have started the engine, everything else will follow. Do people
So
actually see the poll now or my
yeah,
presentation?
it should pop up on their screen. and they should see a poll with a thumbs up or thumbs down. So, who feels
Okay.
prepared for their career search right now?
So should I also do something?
You
Okay,
can
I'm
close
gonna
out.
participate now. Oh, okay, 30. Wow, I love this, guys. 80% feel prepared. 84. Okay. Okay. I mean, that's a pretty amazing number. I wonder if there is some sort of selection bias in the group because you guys are already here. So you probably already did some, you're here, you showed up for yourself, you spent the time with us because you wanted to know what's out there. So I really love to see the number because, no matter how we got to the 80%, I absolutely love this. Okay, maybe I can just put it down. If you want, you can still actually click. So no matter if you said you feel prepared or you don't feel prepared, I want to share something with you. And it's a little bit based on my own experience, but I also think it contains a lot of universal truth. So what I have learned in my own transition and working with, lots of PhDs, often finding a fulfilling career is not so much of a decision than a process. And why I'm telling you this is because a lot of PhDs, they wait until the end of their, the last day of their PhD until they think about their next step. And often it can be really difficult to understand and make that decision. Oh, I want to move into industry and I want to work in this position. So it's actually often more a process where you have to understand, okay, what are my values? Maybe what are my skills? And also, how do all of these things ultimately align with market demands? So for most people, making that transition and knowing where to go next is not a single decision, but it's more of a process where you may need to, talk to other people, or where you may need to just do a lot more self-reflection than just saying, this is what I want to do. And oh yeah, and actually here it is. So you can ask yourself actually questions like, what are the skills that you have, right? What do you like and what values do you have? And when PhD students sometimes say to me, but I don't really have time to do all of that stuff during my PhD, I always encourage them and say, when you're in your PhD or in your postdoc, just pay attention also to the things that energize you, the things that put you in a flow state. When I was at this point where I didn't really know what to do, because I worked towards becoming a scientist all my life, I started really just listening to what's happening to me and when I felt in my flow. So working in the lab felt very isolating for me, which was a clear sign that this wasn't something I wanted to do all my life. But I also listened to what actually did feel more, in aligned with me. And as you have heard, all of these four scientists said they're sitting in meetings all day, every day. But for me, meetings, I like meetings. And I realized I like meetings. I liked to have these coffee chats with people when we met at the coffee machine. This is what felt fulfilling and meaningful to me. And I started reflecting on what it is. And it's because I love brainstorming. I like to connect the dots. I like to problem solve with people, but I didn't actually enjoy the isolated work in the lab. So this is one very easy way for you also to see, and maybe get a hint in which direction you want to go in the future. And if you think about, what are actually the skills that I got, and how can I actually think about, the future and the different positions, I would actually also again encourage you to ask yourself a couple of questions. And I actually talked about this a little bit before, but what are the tasks that I did enjoy the most? Because while we called PhD students, which I think is a very misleading term, but this is a discussion for another I really believe we all do so many different things in our PhD and we wear so many different hats. So you actually can pay attention to the different things. Do you maybe like to design the graphics? Do you like writing? Or do you maybe, enjoy the actual lab work? Do you enjoy the analysis part of the PhD? All of these are parts of the PhD, and just look what feels more like giving you energy rather than draining energy. I have a lot of things. I didn't like writing, which is actually really interesting because I never liked academic writing, but I do love writing on LinkedIn. So there is, for example, a difference. We both call it writing, but it's a different type of writing, and one I enjoy and one I don't. So pay attention to what are the things that you would want to have in your daily life, and what are the things that you don't want in your daily life. And sometimes for many people, I have realized it's easier to start with what they don't want rather than with what they want. Whatever works for you, go with it. And then actually, honestly, where do you want to be short and long term? Because leaving academia is for many of us often also more of a decision of wanting to have more stability, because it would actually help us to, become more maybe, well, we can discuss stable positions in industry. That would be another topic for another careers week. How stable is industry really? We always talk about it, but at least it gives you definitely a higher degree of freedom to move around, because within academia you have few positions. You actually you go where the position is, right? And as you think about your skills and the skills you have when you go and you start reflecting. And if you have been in the resume session, you of course have seen this already. But I want to encourage you to think of your PhD not as an output of publications. And we have heard this several times throughout the Careers Week. Publications are not the currency in industry. Publications don't really matter. And I know it's really heartbreaking and hard to hear from many. I do want to say, if you move into certain positions, for example, like R&D positions in pharma, sometimes they do actually say high impact publications, can be an advantage. So there may be a small number of positions where it's actually relevant, but I can tell you in 99% of the position in industry, they will not. I don't want to say care because it sounds very harsh, but I think in a way it's really true. What they care is, what are the skills that you actually gained to get that output? What are the skills that you applied to write this paper? And if you think about all the things that you had to put in to produce this paper, you can totally agree with me that you had to learn so many different things that are beyond the expert knowledge that you actually wrote down in this paper. But you had to learn writing, you had to learn collaborating, often with different with clinicians or people from other fields. You had to communicate your science. You communicate it in lab meetings, maybe in department meetings. You go to conferences, you present a poster, or maybe sometimes even, if you're selected for a talk. There's so many other things like project management. We just heard from Sophia, who moved into a project management position without any PMP certification. And it's all about, because she knew where she wanted to go. And she framed her entire experience when she walked into interviews around the project management experience. So really, I would invite you to reflect on all of these things and the amazing skills that you have actually acquired. And for many of us, it means focusing on transferable skills, right? I mean, look at the example. If you've been here, okay, we can take Emory, because you all have seen Emory. Emory he has a PhD in psychology and moved into PayPal, which is a fintech. So psychology and fintech. So how does all of this fit together? But what he really used is he used his transferable skills, which were his coding skills, to move into into fintech. So think beyond the expert knowledge, and also be open to broaden your search and don't narrow it down too much. What we have also sometimes seen is that PhDs really like to, I have done research in a very specific field, and this is where I want to apply my data science skills. I invite you to open up your mind and think, where could these skills transfer to beyond, maybe the narrow neuroscience field that I studied? Because this is really going to open you doors. And I think the most important thing that I also want to tell you today is, your first job doesn't have to be your perfect job. Your first job doesn't decide and define your entire trajectory within industry. So dare to step out and dare to maybe not find the perfect position from day one. That's totally okay, and that's totally fine. So as we're moving into finding a fulfilling career is not a decision. It's a process. I want to leave you with another thought. And really, as you think about going through that
Elena,
process.
really quickly, your slides are not showing. Sorry. You were doing great. The talk track
Oh,
was wonderful.
oh
You
my,
didn't
okay,
even
it
need the
stopped
slides, but your
because
slides
I'm
aren't
sorry.
showing.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry, guys. It's because, it's probably stopped because of the poll. Oh, you haven't seen any of this. Okay, I'm sorry. Like, anyhow, this, I just want to show you so you can kind of understand what I actually talked about. I was talking about, no, oh, sorry. I was just
Yeah.
talking about, I'm so sorry, actually,
It's
the
okay.
student.
Elena, everything was great. I would
Was
just
it?
continue. Yeah.
Okay. Anyhow, guys, find, like, yeah, here we are. So as you think about your next step, uh, it can be actually really overwhelming to think about all these different positions and how they align with what you want to do. So what I really want to encourage you is to think about, who am I and what do I want? Because a lot of times we go out and we think, what can I do with my degree? And I will tell you, you can do a lot of different things with your degree. So I think the right question is really to start with you and then see, how do things in industry align with what I want to do? And here again, these are all people, similar backgrounds, and they have like such different positions, or they moved into such different positions. So you can see there is a wide breadth of things that you can actually do. So it's not about what what can I do? The question is really, what do I want to do? And of course, you should have the skills. I think that goes without saying. It's very hard if you make a pivot at this point, coming out of academia, moving into a role where you, I would say, like, essential skills for the role, right? Because when we talk about, Angela and I always say, apply if you match 50 to 70%. And you heard that yesterday from Skylar. If you were there, Skylar didn't have a lot of the skills that were needed for the position, but she still managed to get the job. So the most important thing is, never self-reject, but also be realistic. I think that's a little bit of finding the balance. And yeah, so the last piece, it's not the last piece, it's actually the third piece of giving you inspiration, is like, the decision, in order to help you to find or make the decision, or the right decision, is really to understand, what does it actually mean to work in all of these roles? Because a title, as we have also heard, titles are really titles are not standardized in industry. So one title in one company could mean this responsibility, and in another company it could have a little, I wouldn't say entirely different responsibility. I guess there are some core skills, but it's the title itself necessarily doesn't always tell you what the responsibility of the role is. So what I would really encourage you, go out and speak to people. So really, we didn't have any time to talk about, or did we talk about informational interviews? I think we may have done, and I think it came up in some topics. Go out and speak to other people. Reach out to people who have made the transition and start, hey, I would love to learn more about what it means to work in that role. How did you make the transition, right? So you hear these stories, and you also get to understand, oh, working in this role would actually mean doing X, Y, Z. Do I think I would enjoy that? So there is a lot of insight that you can actually gather from people who are in the industry. I don't think you will get any better insider insight. As you speak to people, and also as Emily said, remember, these are individual experiences. Do apply your critical thinking, because sometimes a person may have not a greatest experience in a company, but that might not be reflect the entire, company culture, for example. So one way of how you could also figure more things out about a company, in particular, to maybe get a more balanced view, you could go to Glassdoor, where they, for example, write reviews. Here again, take it with a grain of salt. I think people are generally more motivated to write negative reviews than they do when they're actually happy at a place. But talk to people, try to gather as much information as possible. And I think that's such a great way. I mean, it was the best way for me to figure out where I want to go. And I mean, without trying to sound cheesy, but I really love what I do. I really love what I do. I put a lot of thought in. It was an accident that I'm sitting here today. I really created this role that I always dreamed to be in. I go out, I speak a lot, I inspire a lot. I do all the things that I feel I love doing. There are lots of things I don't like doing in this business too, to be honest, like all the administrative tasks, but it's part of the job. So you will always have these both sides. So I don't want to sell this as this, everything is like perfect. It's not. But, in balance, I'm very, very happy with the work I do. But yeah, there are a few things I don't enjoy so much. And the last piece of really finding a fulfilling career is to understand how can you actually get there? What do you need to get into that place? So let's say you talk to a lot of people, you thought, okay, I want to be a medical science liaison, or I want to be like, I want to move into finance like Emery, or yesterday, like, Amelia, who has an astrophysics PhD. The question is really how can you get there? And this how can you get there, I think this week really equipped you so well to get all of these pieces on how you actually can make the transition successfully. Because there are a few things that will really help you to make this transition more smoothly. And the first thing is, and I think this is it's probably the second most used word throughout the careers week would be for me networking. I think the first word would be actually clarity. For me personally, I would be very happy to hear what your words are at the end of this presentation. But honestly, networking is so insanely important. I mean, we have learned so many positions, up to 80% are actually filled through networking. So do not underestimate that part. Online presence. We had Stacy talking about, personal branding. We had me talking about LinkedIn, and online presence can be so much more than just LinkedIn, of course. It has something, some people have their own websites, they write a blog. You can be present online in many, many different ways. And I think the important thing is to remember, and this is something that really stuck with me, is we all have a personal brand. You can like the term or not, we can call it whatever we want. We all have a personal brand. Whether you like it or not, you are somewhere visible. The question is, um, how are you actually curating what people see and feel when they find your personal brand, right? So really, and also, I hope you're not leaving this with feeling overwhelmed and thinking, oh, I need to do and fix so many things. I think the important thing is to just do one step at a time from whatever you have learned, and most importantly, do what you I don't want to say that you feel comfortable with, because I love to push PhDs out of their comfort zone, because I can tell you the magic happens when you are uncomfortable. I would never be sitting here if I didn't write that first LinkedIn post, and everyone who has been in my LinkedIn session, it has been insanely uncomfortable for me, but I can tell you 3 years later, I don't feel anything. So, you grow, but you have to just make the step. Get information, be proactive. This is like also something I can't encourage you enough. And you're all here. So I know you're good on that part, because you want to know and you want to take control of your next step. Um, know what your story is. Be very clear. Clarity, right? Coming back to what Chris said, communicating with clarity. This doesn't only go for verbal communication, it really goes for, do you have a resume or a CV that clearly communicates your story / clearly shows how your skills align with the position or the problem that I'm trying to solve? How can you come in and solve the problem that I'm looking to be solving? And last but not least, interview skills, guys. If you have a resume that opens your doors, this is really great. Interview skills, I can tell you from having worked with many PhDs in our program, it's a skill. It's really a skill, and you learn, and you, just like Andy also said, repetition, repetition, repetition. The more you do it, the better you get it. So expose yourself to these situations, but also importantly, if things don't work out, start reflecting and try to gather feedback from people who can actually give you a good sense of why, or how you could actually adjust maybe the way you present yourself. What we see in the work that we do with PhDs, what is it? And we didn't have an interview session actually, which we could have next careers week, but it's a lot what gets in the way of PhDs is that they first of all think they have to be the smartest in the room and they have to show how much they know, when in reality this is not what they're looking for in an interview. This is not an exam, this is a conversation. They assess are you a person I want to work with? And we heard that from the room before. Be conversational, try to have a conversation. Think of this other person in front of you more of as a friend than, someone who's intimidating. Because when you start connecting with the people on the other side of the table, this is what's going to open you doors. And I know this is not the advice a lot of PhDs want to hear. But if you listen to like Sophia and like Michael, and we work with all four of them, really, I think what moved the needle is when they could start relaxing in the interview situation. This is what opened them doors, because they showed a side where they maybe were a bit vulnerable, where people could connect with them. This is super important. So especially when it comes to the interviews, I think a lot of PhDs optimize for the wrong things. But it's also because there is a lot of feedback out there where you maybe feel like, okay, I need to adjust on that. And you don't have to become smarter. You don't have to prove yourself even more. You just have to focus more on connection. And really my take home message for you, and this is what I want to leave you with. And then we will also have a few minutes for some questions, because I want to give you an opportunity to ask all the questions you wanted to ask throughout the Careers Week. Angela is really the expert when it comes to people on the other side of the hiring table. So whatever questions you may have, please feel free to pop them in the chat so we can get going with them. But I really just want to say, you are all researchers, guys. You're all researchers. Plan your career as critically as you would plan a study. You have everything it needs to succeed out in this world, to make that transition. But also don't be afraid to ask for help, right? Because the reality is, what I have learned, we can learn anything in life. But the question is, do you want to take half a year to learn, test and error, if someone has the recipe to help you out? Starting good time, don't start at the day of your defense. Give yourself time to go through that process that I described, because it will take time. But if you have not gotten that time, also don't be afraid. Then you just move into industry and you see what comes next, and you will take the time and you will learn on the job, and you will potentially change directions, or you feel like, I want to do something else. I mean, it's sometimes just to test it. We worked with someone, she moved into a field application specialist role and realized she doesn't like it. And that's okay. You're not locked in. Just move somewhere else. And really, I can't stress it enough. And I know there are a lot of people out there, they say, oh, do I have to be on LinkedIn? Do I have to be on LinkedIn? You definitely don't have to become an influencer. I promise you this, but please make your presence known, both in person, go out, network, and also digitally. Do exist. And also, I really just want to say, think about how you exist out online. When you're on LinkedIn, every comment can be read, every post can be read. Be just the kind, good person. um yeah, this is really what I kind of want to leave you with. And I just want to say, do not forget that your PhD is a driver's license that can literally take you anywhere, right? This is a license that can open you many, many doors. All we need to know is, how can we position ourselves better? How can we communicate in a different way that's actually understood by a new audience that we're not used to talk to? And it's very hard to change language and adjust the way we talk if we don't know what is expected on the other end. So with this, I just want to say thank you so much, guys. It has been a real pleasure. It was so much fun, actually, this Careers Weeks. I'm already looking forward to next year's Careers Week, and we're starting to plan this a little bit earlier. But I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming, showing up for yourself, and investing in yourself. I think it's really gonna be a game changer for you if you implement some of the things that you have learned throughout this week. And with this, I want to say, Angela, please feel free to take questions. And I just want to say, before everyone is taking questions, I'm gonna put in a form in the chat, and it's seven questions. If you have some feedback, we would really appreciate if you could give us some feedback on the Careers Week. Because this will just help us to make it even better for next year and for PhD graduates to come. Maybe you personally won't benefit from it anymore because you're hopefully in a job, but think about the next generation. Sharing is caring. So please take the minute while you're still here. I'm going to pop the link in the chat. Yeah. And Angela, the floor is yours.
So, I see a couple of things in the chat about publications for R&D scientists. So what How we actually advise handling this in your CV is to include the link to your publications. That will help you optimize space for companies that require them or want them and those that don't. But also, if you've published in big journals or you've had particular publications that have had an outsized impact. So we've had some of the people go through our program who have said, I've got this one study, one paper that I published that has over 1,000 citations for it. And it's like, that's great. That's a huge number. So you point to that as in your bullet points or in your select accomplishments section of your resume, where you talk about you did this study using these particular techniques or approaches, and it led to a publication in Nature or in Science that had X number of citations. So those are the two ways that you can handle that in there. Or you can put that paper in your select accomplishments as something that was really, really good. But if you don't have all of the publications, that doesn't necessarily preclude you from getting a position either. So I want to be clear about that. A lot of PhDs tend to focus on the big named companies who, yes, those are some of their filtration criteria because they have so many applications coming through. But if you're going through to smaller companies, smaller biotech, smaller research organizations, they often don't have the name recognition to pull in as highly qualified talent. So, as you heard earlier in the week, where Skylar was talking about this from a data science perspective of she knows that she's got a non-traditional career path coming out of academia later in her career, and so she understands that she's probably not going to get hired at Google and Meta and Facebook, but she does know that she is very competitive for roles at companies that you might not think of first. And so I think that's one thing to think about as you're thinking about publications, not publications, because the quality of your publications matter and the quality of where they were published matter when you get into those larger companies because they're going off of name recognition, but it's not the same for smaller companies. And so that's something to take into consideration. um, so we had another question about, can you give some more tips about interviewing? Elena, as a PhD, what would you say is kind of the outside? We've talked about, coming to the table, being authentic, being human in the interviews, but like, what would you say is one of the kind of most often missed things, just from your perspective as a PhD? What was the one of the most surprising things for you about like good interview technique?
So you mean like, okay, I think coming back, coming from a PhD training, like skip the detail, no one cares, high level answers. I think for me, the emphasis on coming back with clarity, speak with clarity, not don't try to be the smartest, try to be clear, right? This I think was one of the things that I think was a bit surprising for me, but was also, I think it's a trap a lot of PhDs fall into, because what is rewarded in academia, and this is why you need to know the new audience. And I think that's why it's hard, because as PhDs, we don't know the new audience. So what do they value? Coming back to what Chris says, communication is then um, valued when the other side can, it depends. Yeah, what I'm trying to say is understand what the other side needs, because if you can speak to what they value, this will build trust. And at the end of the day, hiring is a sales process. So if they don't trust that you can do the job, or if they don't understand a single word you're saying because it's jargon, they just gonna leave confused. And you know what confused people do? They walk away. So it's the same in business. I'm learning this. If I confuse people with my offerings and they don't know what I'm selling, they will walk away. So I have to be clear. And it's the same everywhere. So I think it applies across. So that was a very
Yeah.
long answer and very detailed, very PhD like to how what surprised me the most.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to answer this question a little bit differently, and I'm going to actually um, give an example, and I'm going to ask for some audience participation here. I'm going to do this the same way that we do when we're coaching people about it. Okay. So one of the questions that PhDs fail out on is one of the first questions that gets asked in the interview process. Tell me about yourself. Okay. And a lot of PhDs will try and give everything about themselves in the first pass. So I'm going to give an example of my experience, and I'm going to ask everybody in the audience to pay attention to how I'm making you feel. Okay? Not necessarily the content of what I'm saying, but pay attention to how I'm making you feel. So I'm going to answer the tell me about yourself in the way that 99% of PhDs when they first come to us answer this question. So, my name is Angela. I'm a business operations professional. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I started out my career at a small market research firm where I was doing research in the home entertainment distribution space, and I focused on custom segmentations work, concept testing, package testing, and forecast demand testing in that space. After I left there, I moved to a larger company where I was at for 12 years. And at that company, I had a couple of different roles. I first was in the market research space doing consumer research for retail pharmacies and for health insurance, where I helped them launch their inaugural studies on that. And then I became the go-to person for how to fix processes and make processes more efficient. So I moved into kind of an informal process improvement role, which later got finalized when I became the chief of staff for their project management office. I helped set up their project management office. And then from there, I went to another boutique research firm where I headed up their research department and I helped them go through and reach their next stage of growth. So I applied Lean Six Sigma principles to help them improve their processes, improve their operational structures, build higher performance in their teams. And then from there, I went on to blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question to the chat. Like, what did you experience when I was saying that? So the description is too long and no break that allows the other person to ask questions. Seems like rambling, boredom, boring, 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 boring. Got lost super soon. That's exactly what the interview is experiencing when you do that in an interview setting. It doesn't matter if they're a researcher, it doesn't matter if they're a scientist, it doesn't matter if they're a PhD. They're a human being and they're going to experience exactly what you experienced when I just did that to you. Now, I'm going to do that same thing a different way. So, Angela, tell me about yourself. So, hi, first, I want to thank you for inviting me for the interview. I'm super excited about the interview. The first thing that you should know about me is that I'm a data geek and a total process nerd. So, if you get me on that topic, I'm the type of person who's going to totally geek out and get on my soapbox. Um, but really, I'm the type of person that likes to solve problems. And so I really gravitate in organizations towards where there's chaos because my little OCD heart can take that and make it into order. And it's something that I really love. And I particularly love it because the thing that really drives and motivates me is helping people unlock their potential because so often I see that potential is blocked by just a simple turn of the dial. And that is really what keeps me driven to do what I'm doing. And that's why I want to do it at a company like yours, where I can see that you're working towards that next stage of growth. And that's a problem that I can help solve. So, with that second version, what did you all notice was different? A lot more personal, approachable, and enthusiastic, more human. What will I bring there? Higher energy, um, enthusiasm. You want me to tell you more. It flowed well. It goes to what the company needs, self-awareness. So the key there is I dropped little bits of relatability into what I'm doing. And somebody said a bit cringy. I work for a lot of startups, Alexandros. So I totally hear you. In some environments, it does make people cringe, but that's who I am. So I'm not going to work in environments that don't like that enthusiasm because I'm going to get in and I'm going to be like a stick in the spokes. And so that's where that's why being kind of who you are and how you approach. I can be a bit cringe. You can ask some of the former teams where I was not in the right environment. Like, I get enthusiastic, I get excited, I geek out. Like, so that's really who I am. But the important thing is that it creates relatability in your introduction. It allows somebody to resonate with you on a human level. And that's important. And there are different cultural aspects to that. So somebody is asking, is that something that lands well in Europe too? One of the companies I worked at was based out of the UK. I used to go over there all the time. They were a UK-based company. There's a cultural aspect for sure to it, but you're not going to get anywhere if you don't come in as who you are. Because people aren't going to relate to you. And as you heard some of our speakers say, more than 50% of the time you're spending in meetings. So I don't want to sit in meetings all day with people I don't like. So how you do this, it's a simple formula. Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? And why do you want to do it there? 4 questions. If you can answer those questions and answer them just as a human being, not in a robotic or scripted way, the likelihood of you passing on to the next stage of interview is very high. So anyways, Elena, you were going to say something.
No, I just wanted to say, as a German, I think, guys, yes, Germans are definitely a little more. We think of Americans as, they're very outgoing, but I think what still holds true is the way you can think of this. I think it's a very personal thing. I don't think we should think of every German as boring, which is the first thing I often think about. Sorry, I'm a German, so I'm allowed to say that. Um, it depends also a little bit in the environment that you're moving in. I think I would say there is a big Germany with 100 million people. There is big differences between companies and between people who actually are in hiring positions. But I think what universally holds true is how you want to answer the question, how you show up, how much energy you put in. This is up to you. But also what I have noticed with a lot of PhDs, they feel like they have to come across as very professional. And they need to kind of like put on a professional mask to be taken serious. But I think it's also important to realize that you should show up as your authentic self. So I think I connect with people well, and I usually show my enthusiasm, and this really transfers across different cultures. Yeah, this so sure there are. I would say Germans are definitely a bit different and than Americans, but yeah, the structure of the response I would still I think is universal.
Yeah. And I think the other thing here is, there's some assumptions made about technical company, non-technical company. I've been at data and tech companies for nearly my entire career. I was working in companies that did data science before it was called data science, when we were still just calling people statisticians, right? And so this holds true. People don't want to be inundated with a bunch of technical jargon because, as you heard, even with Michael in the past conversation, every company has their own jargon. The jargon they use in industry is different than the jargon that they use in academia. And the types of technical terminology they use and how they integrate it in their mode of speech is going to be very different. And so it's important that you understand the more you can speak in plain language, the more it actually demonstrates your expertise. It doesn't take away from it. The biggest experts in companies are those who can switch seamlessly between talking in plain language about what they do versus talking in technical terminology about what they do. So, so I think that's something that's just really, really important to recognize is that in academia, technical language is actually seen and interpreted as a sign of credibility. In industry, technical language is experienced as a barrier to progress. It dampens the communication. It makes it harder to communicate across teams. So if you were coming into the interview and able to explain yourself in a way that even an 8th grader could understand, the likelihood of your experience being understood and how interpreted in a way that would be beneficial to the company is way higher than if you come and speak in a lot of technical language.
And I would also just add, if you guys, because of course now we can't have a too long discussion on it, but I'm gonna send you out the link to the previous sessions. Listen to what Chris said, who really trains people specifically on communication skills. It's about clear communication. So it's not about sounding smart. Skip all of that because it doesn't provide. It provides value within academia, but it doesn't necessarily provide value in this other environment. That is hard for us to understand, which I totally understand, because this is what we're taught to, and this is how we're taught to speak. So yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering.
So there was one more question about, is this how you would design your elevator pitch for a job fair? And the answer to that is the elevator pitch. So, so yes. And then resume question, why the company is first in the experience header? I don't know what that refers to. Um,
I think it
Claire,
may, I don't know either, but Claire, maybe you can clarify. I think it may refer to, when you have the professional experience, you write the company name and then you write the title and then you have the short.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter, honestly, where it comes first. Sometimes it can be helpful to put the company first because sometimes you have multiple roles at the same company. In some resumes, you wouldn't repeat the company name, and so putting the company first and make sure that your formatting and your kind of ordering is the same throughout. In our resumes, we always put the company on every position because it parses better into the ATS systems when you do that. They have an easier time um, interpreting it, but you don't have to put it first. You can put it second if you want. The important thing is just to make sure that the role title is the one that's more prevalent visually um, than the company name, because the role title is more important than the company name. And then we have a question here, what to do when at an interview someone from the team is trying to downgrade you. Um, the best thing that you can do in that situation is stay calm and collected and constructive. Because what that shows is you have the ability, shows the ability to have a difficult conversation. So you're actually showing a skill by keeping your composure during that question or during that um, line of questioning. And it's just about continuing to answer and continuing to be constructive during the conversation. And then at the end of the interview, there's a question that you can ask to help you identify the concern so that you can address it in a pinpointed way. So you can ask, and I recommend you ask this at the end of every interview. It's a great way to get feedback. Do you have any concerns about my background, or is there anything I can clarify for you? And that gives you an opportunity to actually kind of address that more directly without debating it, without arguing with them about it. This is not a debate. It's not a defense. And so you want to just kind of be really constructive and collaborative in how you address it. Um, So then there's a question of, do we have more examples of the elevator speech for a newly graduated PhD? It's very similar. You just use your PhD experience as the baseline for your pitch. So your experience is work experience. Um, and then there's a question about, do you think doing a postdoc after the PhD helps in the transition to industry? For some, yes. And it really depends on what the nature and level of your experience was during your PhD program. So some people have a real depth of experience, a lot of things across a lot of different topics that make them kind of more employable. Some people's PhDs are more theoretical and less application based. If your PhD was more theoretical and less application, doing a postdoc can be really helpful to get the work experience to help you make that leap. Um, and then lastly, how do you reach the hiring managers? So job descriptions our job titling in industry usually follows a certain pattern. So usually it will have the title, comma, and then there will be a subject matter after that. Usually that's the name of the team or the name of the department that that role sits in. And so you're looking for somebody with a higher role in that company who has a similar subject matter after their title. So it's as simple as that. You can do that through LinkedIn. Um, And then the specifics of interviews with small startups. Whew, this one's a hard one. Most startups don't have a lot of structure to their interview process. Most startups are very kind of fly by the seat of their pants when they do these interviews. Most of their interviewers don't have any specific training in how to do interviews, and there's no formal interview training. The key to getting a job with a startup is to match their vibe. It is very, very much about vibe matching. So match their energy. If their energy is low, bring yours up. They'll do the same. Because startups are even more concerned with having people who align and get along with other people in their organization because that's how they progress. And I know this I know sounds fuzzy to a lot of people, but there's actually a good reason for it because the number one predictor of performance on teams is how well an individual experiences a sense of belonging on the team. So it's how well you fit in. And as a manager, I want to hire people who are going to fit in with my team because that ensures that I'm not dealing with a lot of conflict, a lot of interpersonal conflict on my team. That doesn't mean people on my team don't debate and have argument and disagreements, but it means that there's not personal conflict on the team. So, so it's really critically important. And again, I know it sounds fuzzy to a lot of academics, but that's really how it is. So I know Elena. Oh, go ahead.
No, Angela, I just want you to allude to one thing because I think, you having built high performing teams in industry, because sometimes it feels a bit strange for us in academia. I think maybe most academics would agree. We usually pick people based on their level of skills. So, what are the dominating? How would you say what is the level of like if you look at the different things that are actually being evaluated? Because you have the three domains, that are not only skills. So, skills is only one part. So, what are the other parts, and why are they more important when it comes to building high performing teams, and why would hiring managers pay attention? I think is always my experience with PhDs is they integrate better when they understand why do we do what we do. So what is your experience from someone who has built these teams and comes in and fixes teams that are
Yeah.
actually broken?
Yeah, so that I think that's an important point. A lot of my work has been about around fixing broken teams. And a lot of to be frank, a lot of the brokenness in teams does come from biases in hiring. And that's just the reality that we're in. And so when you have a high performing team, there are three kind of categories of what we call fit. So the first is skills fit. That one's really easy to assess because you can assess it on somebody's background. If we're bringing you in for an interview, we already think that you have that. We already think that you have the skills to do the job. The second dimension of fit is kind of your personality. Like that's kind of like how well we think that you're gonna get along with the team members. And then the third is your values fit. And your values drive behaviors. And so if I have somebody who has a high value for autonomy, but I'm a highly collaborative environment where 50% of the time you're going to be sitting in meetings with people, that's going to create a mismatch in terms of how people interact. It's going to create a friction point within my organization. It's the same for those personality clashes, right? If I pull somebody in who's highly verbose and direct and in the way that they address problems, but many of the people on my team tend to be more reserved, that's going to create a conflict in an interpersonal conflict that I'm going to spend a lot of time as a manager trying to resolve instead of getting the work done. It's the same with the values side. So fit is not just do your skills fit? It's also does your personality fit and do the values that drive your behaviors, your way of operating, do those fit as well? And when you get an intersection between all of those things, you can get this really rich environment. Now, that doesn't mean we're not looking for people with diverse backgrounds and experiences. Like we absolutely are. That's where you get performance because you get diversity of thought. And that's really important in a high performing team as well. But you can't get that diversity of thought. You can't get it to come out if you have people who don't trust each other on your team. And you don't get trust when you don't have shared values and you don't have shared kind of some certain shared traits. Does
Yeah,
that
maybe we
help
can.
answer the question? That was kind of a long-winded way to answer your
No,
question, Elena.
I think it helps, and I like to always talk about it because a lot of PhDs sometimes say, "But I did match all the skills. Why did I not get the job?" Because there are so many other layers. Because in academia, that's often right. You got the job, you got the methods, you got the publications, you got the job. So there are few more layers in industry, and I want to explain them because it helps people to understand sometimes why why they should focus on other things like building connection in the interview, because that's what is important. Because guys, when I go and teach, I always talk about, think of a team sitting on a fence. How many people do you need to make the entire team fall? You need exactly one person. So you want to reduce the risk that when you bring someone in, that you have that person that will make the entire team fall and lower the performance of everyone else.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's a really good way of putting it, Elena. It's one person can ruin the whole team. And, as somebody who comes in and has often been on the kind of side where I've got to fix teams, oftentimes what I see is it's one person who's causing everything to fall down and everything to be held up. And so there's a question about neurodivergent people. So as you saw with Emily, Emily mentioned that she's neurodivergent. Um, Also, Emily has the ability to kind of assess the needs around her to see like how she can adjust her approach. All good team members will adjust their approach to their fellow teammates. So, as an example, Elena and I, we are two very different people in terms of how we operate. Elena is the ideas person through and through. She is an idea machine and she tends to be less structured in what she does. That's a necessity for our team because that's the very common profile of somebody who does marketing, and Elena handles all of our marketing. This wonderful event is Elena's brainchild, right? So, but I tend to be more like I'm an introvert. These types of environments are very anxiety provoking for me. I've learned to control that. I've learned to self-manage that so that I can function in my work environment. I also tend to be somebody who's more structured. Very early on with Alma Me, I came in and my first instinct is to go structure everything. Well, guess what happened when I did that? Everything tanked. And so having that balance between team members where I know how to say, this is not my strong area, this is your strong area. And you know how to say, this is not my strong area, it's your strong area. It really can help you get through. So I've had many neurodivergent people on my team throughout the years. Neurodivergent people also have their own set of strengths that they bring to the table. Oftentimes, neurodivergent people can actually sit back and look at a situation very objectively in a way that other people on the team can't. They have a way that they're not emotionally connected to the situation in the way that they are. I actually have, these people tend to be arbitrators on the team. They tend to be the people who can bring other people together because they can maintain that objectivity, right? That's just one example of one type of neurodivergence, but that's something that is really important. So as you think of yourself as neurodivergent, think of that from a strengths-based perspective. Um, what are some strengths that you bring to the table as a neurodivergent because you have a different perspective and point of view and approach than somebody who is neurotypical? Um, and those are the things that you can really highlight. So you don't want to treat it as a deficit, treat it as a superpower. Um, so that's how I would think about that.
And guys, if you haven't been here, because people are saying, when is Almami coming to Europe? Bring it to Europe. Guys, I'm working really hard because, I live in Europe. And as Angela just said, teams like I think we couldn't be more different, Angela and I, to be quite frank, but we have a strong alignment in values and mission and vision. That's why we work so well together, but we're also complementary in our skill sets. However, Angela can work on her own. She loves solitude. I'm a person, I thrive when I'm with other people. So that's my motivation to bring Alma Mater to Europe so I can finally get some colleagues here. This is a very personal mission, not only to help you guys, but also to get myself some colleagues in real life, because all of them are in the US, and we're really all over the globe. So
Yeah.
yeah, I have
So
a personal incentive to do that.
yeah. And in the meantime, for those of you who are not in the US, we do have a self-directed learning platform. You can see that on our website. We have quite a few digital courses on there that contain a lot of the stuff that we've discussed in greater detail, but also there are a lot of the resources that people in our program use to come up to speed on things as well. So, with that, Elena, I think, are we ready to wrap up?
I think we're ready to wrap up. I think we're ready to wrap up, and I think I'm also ready to start into my weekend. It has been a wild ride. Whoever has been with us the entire week has seen, this was literally like running an experiment, and that's why really doing a PhD, running this business is not so different. It was an experiment. I could account for many factors, and there were some I didn't think about. I've learned a lot. I'm gonna adjust the experiment for next year. I hope you enjoyed this week. I definitely did. Angela did too, even though it's a bit exhausting for her. I think she enjoys these events because, you guys are usually all very kind people. And yeah, so I just want to say, I hope you go and implement some things, take some action. And yeah, I hope this is not the last time we have seen each other. I hope we are going to engage on LinkedIn, or maybe you're gonna listen to our podcast, or in whatever way you're gonna keep engaging with us. It was a real pleasure working with you all. And yeah, I just want to say thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Take care.